MegaPodTastic.
Good morning, MegaPodlings. It's Crazy Joe here. Today we are going to be talking about the character of Deadpool. Obviously, most people know Deadpool from the series of films starring Ryan Reynolds. However, the character has been appearing in comics since 1991. The other night I was on the Poindexter Lounge, which is another channel, a channel I recommend, and you should subscribe to them. I say subscribe to them. And I'm on there frequently as a guest. And I was on there as a guest the other night. And the topic turned to mature TV shows and movies being made for mature audiences based on comic books that were not initially intended for mature readers. The topic started with the TV show Titans, which is a show on HBO Max based on the Teen Titans comics from DC Comics. The show is very much for mature audiences with a lot of sex and profanity. And my attitude was that I don't think that show should be for that audience because it is based on the Teen Titans comics, which are a more general audience book. They're not a mature reader's comic, and very often the Teen Titans characters are marketed to children. Look at the cartoon series Teen Titans Go. Whereas certain characters like the Doom Patrol lend themselves to an R rating, I argued that the Titans do not, and that is the wrong direction for that show. Now, this is all subjective, of course. But during the course of the conversation, I mentioned that the Deadpool movies did not need to be rated R. Let's take a look at the clip.
I will say this, though. It depends upon the movie, too, because, look, Deadpool, absolutely fine. Rated R. And much needed. Deadpool, I'll very much stand behind the point that Deadpool needed to be rated R. It was good that it was rated R. Too.
Oh,
I mean, it works.
Wow.
It works as a rated R movie, but it certainly didn't need to be
are
rated
you
R.
on I will.
Do
You
realize that
Deadpool? Yeah, Deadpool absolutely did not need to be rated R. Absolutely did not.
I agree to disagree.
You are crazy.
Honestly, if you guys say it does, I'm going to tell you flat out, you don't know comics. Because Deadpool is a character who was introduced in the New Mutants. It was not a mature titles book. It was not a Marvel Max book. It was not a mature titles.
No, it's an adaptation.
From that clip, you could see that as soon as I mentioned that Deadpool did not require an R rating, they started laughing. They started acting like what I was saying was completely ridiculous. But the fact is, while I'm a person who does respect differences of opinions, and I do believe that there is room for lots of opinions in this space, and that other opinions must be heard and respected, they frankly were completely wrong. This isn't a matter of opinion. This is a matter of fact. It is an absolute positive fact that Deadpool did not require an R rating. If anyone tells you that Deadpool required an R rating, or that Deadpool could not have worked without an R rating, they are not correct in any sense of the word. They are flat out wrong. This is not a matter of opinion. It is fact, and it is fact because it is provable, and it is provable because Deadpool has already succeeded for years without an R rating. Let's take a look at the history of the character. Deadpool was first introduced in 1991 in New Mutants, number 98. Now, I want you to take a look at this little symbol in the corner of New Mutants number 98. That was called the Comics Code seal. Now, first of all, we need to talk about what the Comics Code seal is. Back in the 50s, the government was thinking about getting involved in censoring comic books. There was some outrage. This is a whole other topic. We could do a whole video on this, so we're going to kind of skim over it. But as a self-censorship, the comics industry adopted the Comics Code, which was a code to let you know that your comics were appropriate for your kids to read. Now, the Comics Code Authority seal appeared on all major comic book publications. That's DC, Marvel, Archie, the major publishers. The indies, not so much. The indie publishers would, they didn't always use the code. But the major publishers like Marvel and DC, they used the code. And all the major comics like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, they appeared with that symbol on there. And that meant that your book was appropriate for the children. The children could read that book and they weren't going to be getting salacious material. Now, Deadpool, first appearance was in New Mutants 98, which appeared under the Comics Code Authority. Deadpool got spun off into his own series in 1993. Here's the cover of Deadpool #1 from 1993. And you can see on the cover, the Comics Code Authority seal does still appear. So when I say Deadpool can exist without an R rating, I say this from a basis of fact. The character has existed without an R rating for the bulk of his existence. For the longest period of time that there has been a Deadpool in the world, he has not been R-rated. That is a new development. I did a little bit of research on when Deadpool took a turn for the R-rated, and I found an article from Comic Book News? Anyway. I'll put the link down below. I'll link to the article down below. But the article is called Comic Book Questions Answered, When Did Deadpool Become an R-Rated Character? Now, this was published in January of 2016. Oddly enough, almost to the day that I'm recording this video. It was January 24th, and I'm recording this video on January 23rd. So this was just a few years ago on almost the exact day. But this article gets into the history of Deadpool and when he became an R-rated character. Now, first of all, they do mention the fact that when he first appeared, he was in the Comics Code. And they do mention that there was a comic book series called Deadpool Max that appeared under the Marvel Max line. That didn't come until the year 2010, okay? Now, the character first appeared in 1991, and it wasn't until 2010 that he appeared in the Deadpool Max series. That was the first series to have nudity in it. Now, if we look at an R rating, what does an R rating require? It requires nudity, sex, profanity, and violence. Those are the things that will get you an R rating. Nudity, sex, profanity, and violence. Well, Deadpool, right off the bat, nudity and sex, that wasn't going to be in Deadpool, in the comics. So you've got profanity and violence. Well, there was no profanity in a Marvel comic. They would do the little goofy symbols that indicated that somebody was saying something obscene, but there was no actual profanity being written in these books. So all you had was violence, and it was comic book violence. It wasn't R-rated violence. There was not a lot of blood and gore involved. Now, according to this article here, it was in 2001 that Marvel Comics decided to drop the Comics Code Authority. And at that time, they decided to start giving their comics ratings in-house. And this began with Deadpool #65. Deadpool #65 was given by Marvel the rating of PG. That's what they rated Deadpool, PG. Now, eventually they found out that they couldn't do this because the MPAA ratings for movies need to be licensed. You can't just stick them on something. You have to go through the MPAA. So Marvel was forced to change their rating system. They realized they could not use the MPAA ratings, so they had to drop the PG from the book. So starting with Cable and Deadpool in 2004, they started using the rating PSR, Parental Suggestion Recommended. That was basically the Marvel equivalent of the PG, PSR. Now that was starting in 2004. That's what you would find on comics involving Deadpool. In 2007, Cable and Deadpool ended its run, and a new book called Wolverine Origins Deadpool appeared in, and now it was called Parental Advisory, or T+ was the rating they stuck on the book. Now again, it wasn't until 2010 when the character appeared in Deadpool Max that the character first actually got a mature rating, that this was a book for mature audiences only. So that's the history of Deadpool. So if you want to tell me that Deadpool could not survive, he could not work, required an R rating, you are flat out wrong. And I don't say that to be mean. I don't say that for any reason other than we have evidence, facts, history to back that up. And the fact is that this character that was first appeared in 1991 has existed for the bulk of its run in a PG/PG-13 capacity, though we couldn't actually use those ratings because they're owned by the MPAA. But that's the level of violence you would have found in a Deadpool comic until 2010 when he appeared in a Max title. So there you go. That's the bulk of the character's run. And it wasn't until 2010, just about 10 years ago, that the character, well, 12 years ago now, that the character first became an R-rated character. Now, I do love these movies. I got both Deadpool 1 and 2 on physical disc here. These are both Ultra HD discs, and they're both R-rated, and they're great movies, and I love them. And the R rating certainly works. It works. There's no two ways about it. It's not that the R rating harms these films in any way at all. These films, totally comfortable with an R rating. They also put out a PG-13 cut called Once Upon a Deadpool. This is just an alternate cut of Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 was rated R. They recut it and as a PG-13 film called Once Upon a Deadpool. And you know what? This is actually the better version of the movie. As good as Deadpool 2 is, and it was great rated R, it was even better with the PG-13 because, look, inglorious PG-13, because it actually made the movie, surprisingly enough, the movie's more inappropriate with a PG-13 because they start comically censoring words. Anytime anybody uses a word that begins with an F, Deadpool will beep the word. And that has the side effect of making words that aren't obscene sound obscene. So this becomes far more wrong than this. So there you go. And this is proof that Deadpool does not require an R rating to work. And in addition to the bulk of the character's run in comics. So where do I stand on Deadpool? Deadpool 3, stick with an R. Stick with an R. We know it works with an R. But if someone tries to tell you that it requires an R and that it won't work without an R, you now know that they are flat out wrong. And that's not an opinion. That is provable fact. All right, everybody, keep wearing those pajamas.
Keep wearing those pajamas with the plastic feet. Keep wearing those pajamas. Tell everyone you meet. Keep wearing those pajamas with the back door flap. Keep wearing those pajamas. Don't open, it's a trap. Oh no, it's a trap. Some people call them PJs, some people call them jammies. They can come embroidered with big money and no whammies. They can have 100 tiny commander adamas, but no matter how they look, just keep on wearing those pajamas. Keep on wearing those pajamas. Keep wearing those pajamas. I know we're having fun. Keep wearing those pajamas. And now the song is done.